Hello, awesome people. I hope you're having an amazing day today. Today we're taking a look at the short story, The Room in the Castle. It's a 1964 short story by Ramsey Campbell. It's the second short story in the Culprit collection that we're doing a deep dive into. It's set in the Cthulhu Mythos. It's one of his earliest short stories. Like the previous short story that we reviewed from this collection, that was his first one that he ever published. It is a 7- out of 10. It has, I don't like its ending as much, and it doesn't have some of the verve, and it's probably a few pages too long, but it definitely is a lot of fun things that happens, and it's definitely well descripted. So I'm going to be giving this a 7-, like a 6.8 or a 6.7 that I'm rounding up to a 7 proper, which is the same rating as I gave the first episode that I already reviewed for, the first short story in this collection, and was the first one that he published. Now, Ramsey Campbell is a big name in the horror genre. For example, I've read this novel of his called Midnight Sun about 10 years ago. And he is somebody who has developed his craft, and he is definitely someone who's known for melding. When you're reading his stuff, he's melding the awesomeness feeling as well as the horror feeling to his stuff, to his prose. So that's something that he's definitely done pretty well, actually, later on, decades into his career. But starting off, this stuff is just horror. It took him a while to sort of develop his craft to that place. Decades. That was something that Algernon Blackwood is something probably pretty famous for in his short story The Willows, which is often considered by many, including H.P. Lovecraft, to be the best horror short story of all time, and it's also my favorite horror short story of all time. And I reviewed it for you, so you can read it. You can read it. You can also read it online. H.P. Lovecraft also later on in his career was also having a lot of this melding of the feeling of that's awesome with the feeling of, oh my gosh, that's not good, it's uncomfortable. So he was also somebody who could do that later on in his career too. So that's something that Ramsey Campbell can do. Now this is the fourth short story by Ramsey Campbell that I've reviewed. I bought a horror collection with him in it that I read. And I also picked up a collection with a fantasy short story. It's the first fantasy short story that I've read by Ramsey Campbell. So I also reviewed that for you. And then we're starting this collection for you folks. The cold print. And I'll link you to cold print online on Amazon, where I bought mine probably like 15 years ago or so for you. And now I am reviewing it for you. As a reminder, I dedicate my Octobers to the Cthulhu Mythos reviews. I do my 3 reviews a week. Now, I have already I started this month off with a few Lynn Carter ones that were left over from the previous October. And now I'm going to be doing, this is my second review with Ramsey Campbell. We'll be doing a deep dive into Ramsey Campbell this October. And I'm reviewing this in mid-September, a couple of weeks beforehand, because I'm already in the mood. I love the Cthulhu Mythos so much. I read my first Lovecraft Cthulhu Mythos collection when I was in college, and I've been doing a deep dive into the Cthulhu Mythos stuff and horror stuff ever since, and I've been really enjoying it. And I've probably been reading about twice as many horror things than fantasy or science fiction, which I read a lot coming out of high school and in the early days of college. And so I still read a few things here and there, and also a few things for this channel, and this channel reviews those 3 genres 3 times a week. As a reminder, this channel's title, The Worst Thing About New Books, comes from a short story, from a quote by an 18th French person named Jacques Joubert, that was the worst thing about new books is they keep us from reading the old ones. And so I like to do a lot of reviews of older things. So a 1964 short story by one of the UK masters in horror is definitely something that is decades ago, right? It's more than 50 years ago, so it's definitely something that's an older work, right? That keeps us the new stuff keeps us from reading. And I definitely am somebody who likes to go back and read these sort of older things as a part of my exploration for this channel. Also, as a reminder, I try to keep my reviews spoiler free, so I'm only going to give you a sort of really quick synopsis of The Room in the Castle, which was about 22 pages. It took me about 40 minutes for me to knock it out last night. for the second time. I've read this collection like as soon as I got it, like about 15 years ago, but I don't really remember this short story that well. I remember the first one that we reviewed, the Church in High Street, that we reviewed for you, but I don't really remember this one that well, except for some of the basic beats. But basically, what's happening is that Ramsey Campbell is basically he's setting his world in the Cthulhu Mythos, which was created and with a shared mythos with H.P. Lovecraft's stuff, and some of the writers like Clark Ashton Smith and Robert E. Howard and Frank Belknap Long and other writers that were writing contemporaneously with his stuff, and they were all sharing story elements with each other, and that's where this became sort of a shared universe. So he has created a place in the UK that is brand new. It's not on any map that has a lot of these sort of lingering historical issues, these sort of dark corners and so forth. And this is set in one of those places in this area that he has created, and that's something that Lovecraft, the guy who sort of created this mythos, he also was doing too with his New England stuff. Like, for example, he creates a city for the Shadow over Innsmouth called Innsmouth, the title city of this decayed and centuries-old harbor on the seas in New England, right? And that's something he creates. He also creates the Miskatonic River, the Miskatonic University, right? And as well as some of the elements in this are the Necronomicon, which is right early on in the short story, as well as name shots of places. People like Cthulhu is also mentioned here too. So this is definitely in the Cthulhu mythos, but again, it's set in his own creations in the UK, which I really like. And I appreciate that he's adding his own stuff rather than just copy pasting like a lot of things in the mythos sort of do. Okay, I've got my mention of the Necronomicon. I've got my mention of Cthulhu. I've got my mention of the Cthulhu language, like some of the language that was used in the Call of Cthulhu short story that kicked everything off, right? And so on and so forth. And I got my little checklist, right, of tentacles and tendrils and big words like cyclopean that H.P. Lovecraft used in like all of his short stories at least once. It's in here too, right? So I got my little checklist. Okay, so now I can say I'm done, right? And there are a lot of short stories, but this doesn't have that much. Although again, it's still going to have some of those sort of things, but it definitely feels setting it in a new place in the UK. This has a fresh feel with it, which I enjoy. We're in the second. Now, as a reminder, I've divided the Cthulhu Mythos up into generations. Generation 1 were the people that wrote contemporaneously with Lovecraft up through his death in the late 30s, and then I consider up through 1940 to be Generation 1. Generation 2 starts writing in about 1940 and finishes up in about the mid-60s with Tales of the Cthulhu Mythos. So this is right about the end of the second generation, beginning of the third generation. So that's where this is sort of set in the Cthulhu Mythos generations that I created. So there you are. I'll go ahead and leave you to it. Have you read The Room in the Castle by Ramsey Campbell? If so, what did you think about it? Would you like to talk about some of the spoilers in the comments below? Let's do so. I'd be happy to do so. Just put a text on. Let's talk about it. Would you like the ending? Did you think it had a different rating? Hey, let's talk about it. If you enjoyed this review, why not hit that subscribe button? There's going to be a lot more of these to follow. And then finally, I want to thank you so much for taking some time out of your day and investing it and watching my video. We all have so many things that are happening in our lives, and we're pulled in so many different directions. So the fact that you spent this time with me is incredibly humbling, and I appreciate it. So thanks again, and have an amazing day.